Good morning, ladies and germs. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Propaganda. I'm Duncan King. Before we go back into debunking the carm.org website, I have a question from a viewer. And I like to start a tradition with this show and like to do this throughout the course of the show. Whenever anyone asks me a question, whenever anyone makes a comment, ideally, I'm going to try to respond to it on air. But if it's a question, I'll be much more likely to respond to it than if it's just a comment. And especially if it's a sincere question. If it's just some kind of jerk question, then I might not. But this was a sincere one, and we're going to go to that question right now and take a look at it. And let's see here. What happened there? It didn't register my little click there. Okay. It was on my part 5 episode of debunkingcarm.org. And it comes from Jessie Wiltfong. And she asked me, speaking of graven images, would the Pope be considered an idol for Catholics? I'd never really received an answer from either Christians or atheists on this particular question. Well, Jesse, when we speak of Catholics, we have to be fair and criticize them for what they're claiming. In our culture, in American culture, we are used to having very outspoken Protestants. So, for instance, we've only had one Catholic president. Most of the people we see on TV, the street preachers, the televangelists, all those people are Protestants. And so we're kind of used to a Protestant concept that I think you're applying unfairly to Catholics, which is the concept of what's called sola scriptura. And sola scriptura, briefly stated, it means the Bible is the sole source of all knowledge and truth. Catholics don't follow that. They follow a doctrine called prima scriptura, which means the Bible, along with the church doctrines, are the source of truth. So there are numerous things in Catholicism that they consider the source of truth, other than just the Bible. Now, as far as them following idols, even then, I wouldn't say that the Pope is an idol. Pope means father. And the Pope obviously is not a graven image. The specific passage that we're talking about was a passage that spoke about specifically graven images. So that means taking an image and carving it and then worshiping it. And as I spoke about in part 5, there's a punctuation in between the statement about making the graven image and worshiping the graven image. And back then in Bibles, in the old texts, the original autographs or the documents that existed back in the old Hebrew, those punctuation marks weren't there. So what you just had was just big blocks of all capital letter text. So it just said this, 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 this. There was no punctuation. There was no way to see when a sentence stopped and another sentence began. So when we're looking at a specific passage, that comment could easily be seen as one comment. Don't make the graven image and don't worship the graven image. So to ask if the Pope, even if they did worship the Pope, or even if they did make a graven image, would the Catholics necessarily be breaking that rule in the Old Testament? And I would say no, because unless they're actually worshiping it, then they're not, because that comma, that period in between those two statements is something we added to the text. So specifically, if you're not treating that period as though it's there, it's only a violation of that law if you worship the graven image. And Catholics do have graven images. They have what are called Madonnas, which are statues of the Mother Mary, and they do kneel in front of that statue and pray. And they also have crucifixes, which means it's like a Protestant will have a cross emblem, something of Jesus, but it will usually just be the cross itself, whereas the Catholics will actually have Jesus on it. And a lot of times in Catholic churches, they'll have a crucifix. I mean, it'll be the cross, and actually physically Jesus will actually be physically on the cross as sort of a statue representation of Jesus. What Catholics will say in that instance is that he's not an idol. They're not actually worshiping the actual physical object that has been carved into that cross or carved in front of that cross, or the Madonna statue. They're not actually worshiping the Madonna. Those are instead icons, which means that they're representations of Jesus. So when you're praying to that statue of Jesus, you're not actually praying to the statue. You're praying to just the iconic representation. And you can say the same thing about the Pope himself. Is the Pope an idol? No, he's not a graven image, but they could say he's an iconic representation of the church itself. So when people see the Pope come by and they bow to the Pope and they kiss his hand, they're not actually kissing the Pope's, they're not actually worshiping the Pope, according to Catholics. They're worshiping his representation as the father of the Catholic Church. Now, another thing a little dangerous here when we talk about this subject is that we really can't say that any denomination of Christianity, at least in my personal opinion here, that any denomination of Christianity, whether it be Catholics, Calvinists, Baptists, Eastern Orthodox, any denomination of Christianity, in my personal opinion, is no more rightly deserving of being called correct than any other. I could sit here and play devil's advocate and argue that Calvinism is right. I can argue that Baptists are right. I can argue that Lutherans are right. I can argue that Jehovah's Witnesses are right. I can argue that Mormons are right. I can argue that Muslims are right. The only way I could argue that any of them are wrong is by taking one of their views and arguing based on that view, which means begging the question in the case of that position, agreeing with their doctrines, disagree with the other doctrines. If you take any church's position, any denomination's position, and you just assume it's right, you're going to come to the conclusion that it's right. Because the issue is that the biblical authors didn't agree on anything. So they all had their own Christologies, their own theisms, their own theologies, their own views of the world and the cosmos. What theology does is that they take these disparate statements that are totally contradictory, written by this author, written by this author, written by this author, and they try to harmonize them. And usually that's a creative process. This is why we have 1,500 denominations of Christianity, because the Bible really has many different views on many different subjects. Now, let me make a case for Catholicism. Again, when we're in the West, and so we're kind of used to outspoken Protestants. Protestants are people that believe in what's called sola scriptura, which means that the Bible is the ultimate source of truth, and no man can make any case that a man is right, or that any church is right, or any church father is actually correct. It's all the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. But Catholics don't believe in that. They believe in prima scriptura. And let me tell you what the basis of that is. It's any passage in the Bible, actually. And it is church. Oops, Peter Rock Church Bible. Oh, get me there. Oh, here we go. It's in Matthew 16:18, and what it specifically says is, this is Jesus speaking here. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. What that specifically means, or at least that's the way Catholics interpret that, is that they believe that Peter went to Rome after Jesus died, sometime later, and he started the Catholic Church. So, and they actually have, they've claimed all along that they had some kind of documentation that actually showed that Peter was the original father, or the original pope of the church in Rome, and that every single pope after him, they were called bishops at the time, and they eventually adopted that word pope later, but And Pope comes from patriarch, which just means father of the church, or the number one father of the church. So they believe there's only one church in the entire world that is actually the church of Jesus Christ. He says that you are Peter, and upon your rock I will build my church. And if we're assuming that I'm sorry, there's an ad playing in my ears right now. Fuck off, ad. Oh my goodness. What is Bible.com turning to, where I'm getting a goddamn car ad on Bible.com? What is and even Bible.com doesn't have standards anymore. Anyway, the passage specifically says that you're Peter, and upon your rock I will build my church. He doesn't say a church, he says my church, which means the Catholics that there's one church. The one church that represents Jesus Christ on earth, and all the other ones are wrong. All the other ones are fake. All the other ones are copycats. All the other ones are inauthentic, are imitations, whatever you want to call them. None of them are really the authentic church. The only one church is the Catholic Church. And if the Catholic Church is the true church of Jesus Christ, as they claim, is that one church that Jesus ordained, then basically anything they do, any idea they come up with, whether it be nuns, you're not going to find anything about nuns in the Bible. You're not going to find anything about the idea that Mary was born without sin, or the idea that you go into confession, or there's a lot of things Catholics do that you're not going to find in the Bible anywhere. But they think that they can come up with doctrines because they are the Church of Jesus Christ. And if they're actually the Church of Jesus Christ, as ordained by Jesus in that passage in Matthew, then anything they come up with, any kind of doctrine they come up with, is basically Jesus coming up with it. Now, the problem with this, obviously, that people don't like, is that it's letting the Catholic Church, or the elders and leaders of the Catholic Church, basically just make up anything they want. Or that's what any kind of rational person would criticize them for saying it. But let me still make a case for the Catholic position. The concept of sola scriptura, that Protestant ethic, that the Bible is the sole divine truth, and anything you come up with that doesn't in the Bible is not a real doctrine and just ignore it, is not in the Bible. So the concept of sola scriptura is a self-contradicting idea, because it's saying that the Bible is the sole source of truth, which is a statement that is not in the Bible. That itself is an extra biblical idea. The concept of the Bible itself is not in the Bible. There is no book in the Bible that tells you which books to gather together, put them into between two covers, and say, this is the Bible. You're not going to find that idea in the Bible anywhere. The meat and potatoes of the Bible, which would be Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, that's called the Torah in the Old Testament. So that's where you find the story of Adam and Eve, the story of Cain and Abel, the flood, the patriarchs, Moses parting the Red Sea, the Ten Commandments, and all that stuff. That's in the Torah. And the first four books of the New Testament, which are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are called the Gospels. Those are the doctrinal basis of Christianity, because those are supposed to be the story of Jesus. And so they contain all Jesus's teachings while Jesus was supposedly on earth. Those are the meat and potatoes of the Bible. Neither of those things, the 5 books of the Torah and the 4 books of the Gospels, claim to be inspired by God. They don't claim it. They don't say anywhere there that God told me to write this. So as I'm exhibiting here, the idea that those books are the word of God is itself something those books don't say. So that idea itself is extra biblical. So the concept of sola scriptura, that the Bible is a source of truth, is contradicting itself, because the Bible doesn't claim to be the sole source of truth. So now, if I'm presuming the Protestant position, I could argue against the Catholic position. I showed how both of them have problems, obviously, because if we're arguing the Catholic position, then basically anything the Catholic Church comes up with is they come up with anything. And we all know that over the centuries, one pope said this and another pope said that. They contradict each other. They change their rules all the time. So how can we really say that they're being spoken to by God when they're obviously always changing their doctrines? So that's a little bit of a weird part of Catholicism. But at the same time, as I just exhibited, the Protestant idea contradicts itself. So in my personal position on this is that there is no denomination that can say that they are more right than another. I could pick Calvinists, I could pick Jehovah's Witnesses, I could pick any of them. I could make just as good of a case that they're right that I just made for Catholics. Another thing Catholics bring up is the idea of the Eucharist. There's a specific passage in the Bible where Jesus speaks of the Eucharist, and he says that the Eucharist has to be turned literally into the body and blood of Jesus. And in all other churches, they don't actually, and it can only be done according to Catholics, and they can come up with a scriptural basis for it by the church, by the Roman Catholic Church. So if you have not received an actual Eucharist by the Roman Catholic Church, you are not going to heaven. They can come up with a pretty good case for this in the Bible. Talk to a Catholic. You can go on Catholic websites and find these more things about it. Religious studies are always interesting, even if we don't believe in the religion. So that's a good question and a good question to answer on the show. So thank you for that, Jesse. We're going to go back to the carm.org website now. And I stumbled through that a little bit, but I got through that. I felt I kind of got through that explanation. A little difficult for me, but I got through it. So let's go back to carm.org. Come on. There we go. All right. Carm.org. And back to Bible difficulties. And last time we left off with the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. This seems a little more, okay, this question is a little more of a continuation of some of the other ones you've asked about Israelites destroying cities and all this kind of stuff. This just seems to be another instance of that he's bringing up here. Deuteronomy 2:33-34, and the Lord our God delivered him over to us. And we defeated him with his sons and all his people. So we captured all his cities at that time and utterly destroyed the men, women, and children of every city. We left no survivor. The command by God, this is Matt Slick talking, to kill all inside a city is seen by many to be immoral and a demonstration that the Bible is not true. But we must examine the issue in light of its context, its biblical context, not in light of present-day non-Christian assumptions. We want to see if it is moral or not. We must know which morals are in question. First of all, the context of this verse is dealing with the wickedness of the Amorite king, Sihon of Heshbon, a city of the Amorites, in Numbers 21-25. They were a wicked people, says in Genesis and 2 Kings. When the Israelites wanted to pass through their land during the Exodus of Egypt, the Amorites refused them safe passage and attacked the Israelites. However, they were soundly defeated by Israel. It is in this context that God delivered them over to the Israelites, that is, in the context of the battle. Why would the decision of the Amorites be so serious that God he would have all their people wiped out? The answer is simple. God tells us the Israelites why the people were destroyed. It was because of the wickedness of the Amorite people. Why are they so wicked? Because they're wicked. It's stupid. It is not for your righteousness or for the uprightness of your heart you are going to possess their land, but it's because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God is driving them out before you in order to confirm the oath which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. More Matt Slick here. God has declared that the Amorite people deserve to die because of their sins. They remained unrepentant, unlike Nineveh, and the righteous wrath of God fell upon them by the Israelites. Since we're all sinners, all deserve to die. They were no exception. Oh, that's so compassionate. Nevertheless, God is merciful by allowing them to live. In the case of the Amorites, God was gracious to them by letting them live and enjoy life with its generic blessings from God. But visions of rain, thunder, watcher, etc. While he encouraged them to repent of their sins, they refused to turn from their immorality and were wiped out. Also, the death of a child might be a very merciful thing because God had the child growing up in sin of the Amorite culture. It would surely have suffered the eternal wrath of God. If the age of accountability notion is correct, then God delivered them into his hands, and it is possible that by this they were spared eternal damnation. Oh my God, you are a fucking nutcase. The final and most important lesson for their destruction is that God needed to keep the messianic line pure so that Jesus could be born and thereby redeem his people so that believers could go to heaven. Without Jesus' sacrifice, all would be damned. If the Amorites were allowed to live, surely they would have influenced the Jewish nation in a harmful way, thereby threatening the arrival of the Messiah. Therefore, God, in his righteous judgment, executed judgment upon them. I'm not giving a comment to that. Anyone who is at all rational can see the problem with that. You're a sick fuck. And I can't even say that dramatically because the screen share, I gotta turn here. I say this really cool line, you're a sick fuck. I turn away and the camera's still on the side of my head, so you gotta wait for me to click this fucking share shit. I'll get better at this as I go along. Yeah. I can't even be dramatic when I want to on here. I'll get better at clicking, turning this on and off. Do the sons bear the sins of the father or not? We already answered that. Stone rebellious son. Deuteronomy 21, 18 through 21. If any man has a stubborn or rebellious son, he will not obey his father or his mother. And when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them. Then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him out to the elders of the city at the gateway of his hometown. And they shall say to the elders of the city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. What if he isn't? Okay, so if he's stubborn and rebellious, but not a glutton and a drunkard, then obviously that's a really weird comment to throw in there. I mean, first it's just talking about the kid being stubborn and rebellious. Then they throw this more, he's fat and he drinks. Anyway, then all the men of the city shall stone him to death. You shall remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear of it and fear. Matt Slick's comment. The seemingly harsh punishment, seemingly, you're killing a kid for fucking being an old dickhead, not listening to his parents. All teenagers don't listen to parents. They'll go from a rebellious stage. Seemingly harsh punishment. Every time you have this word, you put this word behind it, harsh, every time you talk about something like this. Seemingly. If you're sitting there and you're actually watching this kid have rocks thrown at him, go look at a video online sometime about someone actually being stoned. They actually exist on the internet. And tell me if it's just seemingly harsh, Matt Slick. Seemingly harsh. It's fucking brutal. It's fucking crazy. Fucking put your head and bury you in the sand, throw some fucking rocks at you and see if it's seemingly harsh. The seemingly harsh punishment for rebellion has been used by the critics of Christianity to infer the moral backwardness of the Old Testament ethics. It is easy to throw stones from the comfort of our 21st century perspective. But the ancient harsh example is intended to keep order in the family and also in society. Consider Exodus 20:12, which says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. God's intention is that the family not degenerate to such an extent that authority is undermined. This has potential serious consequences in society as a whole should familiar rebellion become rampant. In the Old Testament, God appears harsh for several reasons. So either appears harsh, just appears harsh, or is seemingly harsh. You can't just say that someone being stoned is harsh. What it could be harsh? I don't know what by your standards would be harsh. A harsh punishment for anything. Somebody picking up sticks and they're stoned to death. That appears harsh or is seemingly harsh. If that's seemingly harsh, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what your standards of harshness would. Yeah, I don't think you have any standard of what harsh would be. If something that that tame is picking up some sticks warrants you being stoned to death, and you don't consider that harsh, I don't really know what would meet that standard for you, Matt Slick. God appears harsh for 3 reasons. First, it was to demonstrate the exact requirements of the law, a perfect and demanding standard. Secondly, it ultimately demonstrates the need for grace that would eventually be manifested on the cross, inserting his Christian beliefs into the Old Testament. And the Old Testament people didn't believe in Christianity. Third, should rebellion take root at the very heart of the gospel, would be at risk, since the prophecies of the Messiah coming to through Israel could be undermined should rebellion become rampant and society fall apart, causing the prophecies of evil. Other societies don't stone their kids for talking back to their parents, and they're not falling apart. There's all kinds of societies on the earth today that aren't stoning their kids for talking back to their parents, and those aren't falling apart. You have a weird idea of sociology that's based on the Bible, and the Bible is a work of fiction, sir. Why don't you take a look at the real world and see how the real world actually looks sometime? Therefore, we can conclude that this harsh requirement, oh, he's finally calling it harsh, requirement was a necessary legality to instill and designate the necessity of family order and respect, and to ultimately provide another safeguard that would ensure the sacrifice of Christ. Just saying, it's all okay because them stoning their kids somehow is going to bring Jesus around in 700 years after the fact. Actually, he believed it was 1,200 years after this. So they're going to put their kid in the ground and they're going to bury him in the sand up to his neck, and they're going to throw rocks at his face, because by doing this, 1,200 years later, this will cause Jesus to show up. That's what he's saying here. That is absolutely what he's saying here. As crazy as it sounds, this is what he believes. Also consider the following 6 points by John Haley regarding these stores. Considering the following 6 points by John Haley regarding the stores. It's a very weirdly worded sentence. He didn't really correct it. That is a son and not a daughter. He is stubborn and rebellious, a glutton and a drunkard. What the fuck is this? Let's ignore it. He's analyzing the passage. I don't know what this John Haley person is. 1, that is a son, not a daughter. That he is stubborn, rebellious, a glutton, and a drunkard. The parents are the only allowed plaintiffs, and both must concur in the complaint to make it a legal one. He is brought before the elders of the city, and investigation is had into the merits of the case. That no case is on record in which a person was put to death under this law. Then why does it fucking exist? Why is it in the Bible? Why are you going through all this bullshit defending it when you're saying no cases on record in which anyone actually was stoned by this law? The mere fact of the existence of such a law will tend strongly to confirm the authority of parents and deter youth from disobedient and unfilial conduct. So what Matt's saying here is that God put this in the Bible just to keep children from disobeying their parents. Oh, we can kill you. It's kind of like Santa Claus. Be good so Santa doesn't, put a rock in your stocking. Be good, or, we'll take you to the judge and have you killed. You can say this, and you do not know this. We do not have some kind of long record of every single case in Israelites that ever happened. They didn't have a library somewhere where they kept the records of every single person they executed over those next 1,200 years or 1,600 years. I'm sure that they did it a few times, and it probably was made possible by this passage. The person who put this in to the book of Deuteronomy actually enabled kids to be killed by having this in here. He caused the stoning of children, because their parents probably didn't like him, or he was being a little jerk, and they had him stoned. I'm sure that's happened. And you're fine with that, Matt Slick, because you're a fucking asshole. Whatever you can say to defend your Bible, say it. even though it comes to backing up a practice that led to the killing of children for talking back to their parents. Okay, whatever. Women shall not wear men's clothes. Deuteronomy 22:5. A woman shall not wear man's clothing, nor shall a man put on woman's clothing, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. Kind of a tautological statement. Don't do it because don't do it. That's not really an argument for whoever. It's, you know, that's kind of put together like it's a logical argument. It's just saying don't do that because don't do that. Anyway, Matt Slick's explanation, this abomination most probably deals with the mandate to maintain the distinctions between male and female functions and roles. Cross-dressing seems to be the issue here. The man is not to be feminine, the woman is not to be masculine. Neither is to assume the mannerisms and role of the other. Also, to the created order distinguish between male and female very clearly, and adopting the clothes of the opposite sex would blur this line and might even encourage homosexuality. Oh my God, what if that happened? Oh my God. Oh my, so what is he saying? Like if I dress in a skirt, this might make me gay or might make a man want to fuck me. So if I'm hanging out with a totally heterosexual guy and I put a dress on, this is going to make him want to fuck me. I guarantee you, if I put a dress on, that's not going to make anybody want to fuck me. That wouldn't make a woman want to fuck me either. Anyway, let's continue. The same Hebrew word translates detests into ebalit, a detestable thing, an abomination. Yeah, I'm already aware of that. Abomination doesn't necessarily mean that. We usually use this word to mean that God hates it, but it also just kind of means it's unholy. Is used to describe God's view of homosexuality, Leviticus, blah, 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 and also some evidence exists that transvestism may have been connected with the worship of pagan deities, since this law was related to the divine order of creation, and since God detests anyone who does this, believers today also ought to heed this command. I don't know why he put this in the same size bracket as the verse itself, because this is still just his opinion here. I don't know, maybe he's starting to regard his opinion as scripture too. I don't know. But anyway, the passage here says nothing about gay people. This is a gifted son fallacy applied in to fucked up beliefs. Because he obviously believes a good and moral person would hate homosexuality enough to possibly kill people over it. Which is just fucked up. You're a fucked up person. Whatever. Putting on a girl's dress or whatever is not going to cause you to be killed. Anyway, in modern society anyway, for instance, the ancient Greeks, they had backwards views that we have. And a lot of ancient societies that had backwards views. It used to be considered masculine to wear a skirt. And it was considered feminine to wear pants. And the color pink, prior to the advent of color photography, pink was considered a boy's color and blue was considered a girl's color. So what is the boys' clothes and the girls' clothes? It kind of depends on cultures. I can show you photographs of warriors. I'll grab one right here. Of African warriors wearing pink. Elvis drove a pink Cadillac. Grab this image here. Pretty easy to find here. Tribal. Let's see here. Here are some dudes wearing pink and skirts. These are warriors. in this African tribe. These dudes would fuck you up. I mean, these are badasses. These are warriors who fight all the time. And here they are wearing pink. Little pinky sissies. Look at these sissies. I wouldn't call them no fucking sissies, that's for sure. But it's obviously cultural, you know, skirts, pants, whatever. So what is God's official clothes for what is masculine and female? I mean, it depends on the culture, depends on the time. I think that might have been the last one, hopefully. Still in Deuteronomy. So 101 for not being a virgin, Deuteronomy 22:13 through 21. If any man takes a wife and goes into her, yeah, rock and roll, and then turns against her and charges her with shameful deeds and publicly defames her and says, I took this woman, but when I came near her, I did not find her a virgin. So what he found, he didn't smell her. I don't know. I came near her. I guess maybe this means he pulled her slacks down, because she was probably wearing slacks, because they were probably considered masculine to wear slacks. I did not find her a virgin. Then the girl's father and mother shall take and bring out the evidence of the girl's virginity to the elders of the city of the gate. What would that be? Would she have some kind of virgin card? I'm kind of confused. To the elders of the city of the gate, the girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man for a wife, but he turned against her. And behold, he has charged her with shameful deeds, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin. But this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. Okay, what they're saying here is that they have some kind of garment which she bled on during the first sex, I think. I don't know. And I don't know why they would have that if he was having sex with her, if the man was having sex with her. I mean, she'd had her periods in the meantime. I'm not really getting this. How would you? I don't even know how a garment would prove somebody was a virgin until they were married. Anyway, so the elders of that city shall take the man and chastise him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver and give it to the girl's father, because he publicly defamed a virgin of Israel. And she shall remain his wife. He cannot divorce her all his days. Oh my God, the poor woman. If this charge is true, that the girl was not found a virgin, then they shall bring out the girl to the doorway of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death, because she has committed an act of folly in Israel, by playing the harlot in her father's house. Thus she shall purge evil among you. So basically, what happens here is the girl either has to stay with this asshole, or they're going to kill her. There's no good conclusion here. There's no good course of action that could possibly turn out good for the girl here. Here's what Slick says. Critics of the Bible must be careful not to impose their present-day moral system upon that of ancient culture found in Scripture, and then judge Scripture as though it is inferior to their own subjective morality. My own subjective morality is compassion. It's based upon compassion. And basically, okay, what he's basically doing here is he's bringing up called precept. It's a precept argument. He's just saying, well, your views are subjective and God's views are objective because he's God. And so your own subjective views are incorrect, but God's is correct because it's subjective. All moral views are subjective. But human beings have an internal sense of compassion. It's an automatic aspect of their character. And I don't care if you defined morality in some way so that killing a girl because she happened to have sex before she was married would be moral, then I wouldn't give a fuck about your morality anyway. Because I'm a compassionate person. So fuck your morality. Anyway. The above verses were written 3,000 years ago in a very different culture and location. Sexual purity it was actually written about, this is wrong. They were written about, see, we're talking about the book of Deuteronomy here. So it was written about 2000, between 2,600 to 2,400 400 years ago. No, 2,700 to 2,500 years ago. They weren't written 3,000 years ago. Anyway, in a very different culture and location, sexual purity was very highly valued, unlike today. And when a man would marry a woman, her virginity was critical. In ancient times, a dowry was paid to the father of the bride, and the rightful expectation was that the bride would be a virgin. Okay, but the problem, Matt Slick, is that your God supposedly wrote this. So why are you talking about the culture? Who's a fuck about what the culture thought? Your God is supposed to be above culture. He's supposed to be an omnipotent, omniscient, benevolent being who would not be guided by any kind of cultural expectations. The very fact that you're bringing this up again is basically succeeding the argument. You're basically telling us that a human being wrote this, because only a human being would be a product of a culture or a product of his time. So basically saying, well, God, a person wrote this and said it was a decree from God. You're basically admitting that right here in this argument. More from Matt Slick, in the culture of the time, it was the father who was charged with the covering, care, and well-being of his daughter. Her sexual purity was represented by the father's ability to raise her according to the laws of God. Therefore, in that culture, a man's reputation, as well as the family's reputation in the community, could be adversely affected by the fornication of his daughter. If his daughter had been promised to a man to be married and the dowry had been paid, there was every expectation from the bridegroom that she would be a virgin. If the contrary was discovered after the marriage, then the implication is that there would have been a deception in which the father could be implicated. Or it could mean that he was unaware of her sin. And this would bring great shame to the family and the community, not to mention it being a display of outright rebellion against God's law. In this case, to ensure the integrity of the family and remove all the evil of adulterous fornication from the community, stoning was advocated. Finally, she was not stoned for not being a virgin, but for carrying out a deception and trying to appear as one. And there's other passages where they stone virgins. Of course, or girls for just not being virgins anyway. Of course, we do not advocate any type of honor killing. We are simply stating what the cultural context was. No, what you're stating here is that the author of this was a person and not God. This was not inspired by God, by your own statements here. Jack off. Well, anyway, and my other problem with this is, okay, God supposedly was living with these people. He was right there. And you're saying he gave them these laws, these customs, and says, you got to follow these laws. But he's sitting there right above them, and you can't just tell him, okay, you know, if she's a virgin, then that shouldn't even be a problem. You should love her anyway. And she isn't a representation of your family. She's a representation of yourself. It's okay. Why can't he just tell her that? I mean, Dr. Phil can tell that to people and convince them of that shit. Your God can't convince them of that shit? What kind of world is heaven going to be like? What kind of life is that going to be when your God could actually live among people and be speaking to them directly as you believe they did here, and still let their culture kind of bulldoze over him so that he can't even seem to be able to convince people that their own cultural attitudes or their prejudices or their hang-ups are misguided. He couldn't even do that, according to you. So basically, we're going to have the same kind of life in heaven that we're going to have here, according to you. Since whatever people believe, God will be like, oh, well, I can't convince them that that's incorrect. So that's their culture. So, you better just stone her, you know, because that's bringing shame in your culture. So you better do it. Fucking stupid. This will be the end of Deuteronomy. Nope. The last one was the end because we've already dealt with this. Alrighty-o. We'll call that a video. We finished the book of Deuteronomy. We went from Genesis to Deuteronomy. And so the next passages, we're going to go into the next section of karm.org, which would be on Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, book of Joshua. And continue on that next video. Oh, actually, next video, I'm going to go into some of the things in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy that Matt Slick didn't mention. So that's what we'll do next time. And hopefully maybe I'll get another post from somebody that I can respond to. So if you like this video, you like what I'm doing here, subscribe to my channel if you like this or whatever this is. And thanks for watching.